Hey there, it's Andrea, and welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast. Today I have with me Matt Massucci. He is the founder and CEO of Hirewell, a global tech-enabled talent solutions provider. Since getting its start in Chicago 20 years ago, Hirewell has been helping clients grow their organizations by recruiting top-tier talent that they need. His firm partners with Fortune 500 and high growth companies across all facets of their organization. Hirewell is comprised of highly specialized recruiters in the highest demanded fields: technology, human resources, marketing, supply chain, sales, finance and accounting, and real estate services. Matt, welcome to the Voice of Influence podcast.
Hi, Andrea. Thanks for having me.
Hiring and recruiting and retaining top talent, that's always one of the top things that CEOs are talking to me about. I would love to hear about how you got started in this industry, in this field with Hirewell.
Yeah, it's been an interesting journey. I was an accounting major, started in kind of big public accounting consulting, Deloitte, many, many years ago. Realized that wasn't for me, but I took kind of the consultative approach, got into recruiting, search, hiring, and many moons ago when the dot-com bubble burst, my old company went out of business, and that was a segue to start Hirewell. So, 20 plus years later, here we are.
Wow. I'd love to hear a little bit about the journey. So as far as your own vision for it and how things shifted along the way, curious about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, the goal has always been to disrupt the talent space, make hiring better, more efficient, be that true partner for companies. I mean, search can be, or, recruiting firms can be a dirty word for clients. And we strive to be a partner, someone who can understand their business, understand their challenges, and help them get to where they're going. But the journey is never linear. It took a while to kind of get to where we wanted to be. I mean, that first, 5, 10 years, we really were just a pure play tech recruiting firm. Again, the goal was to be more than that, to expand outside of that. And then, 10 plus years ago is when we really started to expand horizontally. We launched all the different sort of functional hiring areas that we do. We experienced some pretty rapid growth, kind of across a few areas. As always, search, providing interim talent, but then kind of a big growth area, that we launched, 5, 10 years ago was what we call on-demand recruiting, where we basically embed one of our recruiters into the process for our clients and basically take over, some or all of their hiring function. So that was a very popular, it's been a popular way to engage with companies, is a little bit more consultative, a little bit more kind of behind the curtain and truly advising them on kind of what to do and how to do it. And then a couple of years ago, we sort of hit the next inflection point for our company where we took some outside investment from a company called Pride Tech, where they basically invest in technology firms, but then also service providers with their goal of creating these tech-enabled service providers. They invested in Hirewell for us to be their talent solutions platform, and done a couple acquisitions since acquired an executive search firm to kind of complete the sort of the top end of the market. Our goal is to provide, kind of the one-stop high-end solution, executive search, team building, all tech enabled, as well as some solutions for clients to help, kind of do this stuff themselves if they don't need necessarily a partner, but still want the technology to, kind of automate and increase their internal efficiencies.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm super curious about the acquisition process and everything. I think, but before that, I want to ask about just hiring in general over the last 20 years. You've been in this industry for so long. Wow, you must have seen some. I would assume you've seen some changes in both the way people recruit or what they're looking for and in what people are looking for in a company. And I don't know, maybe that's always been the same. I'm curious, what's been your experience?
Yeah, it's a good question, and some things have changed tremendously, and then some not at all. Like, I mean, it's still an extremely individual, personal process. Like, what people care about is really unique to them. When I got in the industry 25 years ago, like that was when the internet was just coming around, and the thought was, Monster.com and Career Builder and these things were going to put recruiters out of business. You fast forward 25 years, clearly that hasn't happened. Monster is now owned by a global, staffing firm. Career Builder is, somewhat around. But it's changed. LinkedIn is obviously was came around 10 plus years ago. That was obviously a big inflection point in the industry. But again, there's still, you still need people at the core of the process, whether they're internal recruiters, external partners, or some combination of the two. Like, it's hiring's hard. You need good people to navigate the process. Technology is definitely eating away the fringes of it, and there's opportunities to enhance and improve the process. But like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe this will be a statement that'll look dumb in 20 years. I just don't see bots or chat GPT putting it away. It'll just be ways to augment it, way to streamline it. I mean, it's an extremely labor intensive process, and that's kind of the one area we see there was just a tremendous change over the last 4 years have been a whirlwind. 2019 was booming. 2020 was a bit of a crash when COVID first came around. 2021 was a massive growth into the first half of 2022, and then since we've seen a slowdown. And I think the one constant is companies change their tune. They invest heavily into this function, and then they rip it apart as kind of the first sign of a slowdown because it's an easy place to cut.
Right, right. They think that they don't need it, but they do. They're still looking for the top talent.
Yep.
They're still
Yeah.
they still want the top people. They still want the great hires.
Sure. And I think that's an interesting point because like what we've seen over the last 6 9 months is the headlines speak of layoffs and cuts, and it's big news when Meta or Amazon cuts 10,000 people. But if you look at their hiring trends over the last 4 years, I mean they grew by 5 times that amount. So they're still well above where they were from a headcount perspective 3 years ago. They what they like the change we saw in kind of internal recruiting, the spike we saw in salaries, because our HR practice places a ton of corporate and internal recruiters, and we saw those salaries spike 35% in a year, which is just massive. It went from $85,000 was kind of a sort of standard price to pay for an internal recruiter. That number jumped to like 120K plus, and it's not uncommon for these big tech companies to pay internal recruiters 150 to $200,000, which is just it's like nothing I'd ever seen before. So
Mm,
it's and again, but that becomes the idea is that we love if you think you're going to kind of grow like that forever, then of course you want to build the function. But it does sort of hurt employee morale when you're like building this function and the people who are the sort of the front door of the organization are coming and going that quickly. It's a
yeah.
bit short-sighted, but there's no real playbook for what's been happening for the last couple
Yeah.
of years. Companies are figuring it out and doing their best.
Yeah. That's so true. Um, okay, so I'm curious, do you have a sense of how diversity has played into hiring practices in the last, especially 3 years?
Yeah, well, so 10 years ago, it first started to become a thing some companies talked about. 5 years ago, it became central to sort of what most companies talk about, like where in the percentage of conversations, early on, it was sort of it'd be mentioned. 5 years ago, it kind of became the norm. Like, how do you ensure a diverse talent pool? How do we diversify our organization? Things like that. Recruiting is always sort of the front and center piece to all of that. Again, because it's the single best way to impact and dictate the diversity of your organization is through the talent you hire. So I think we've always been at the forefront of that, for kind of a couple of ways or a couple of reasons. We have a sister company that I also co-founded called Holistic, which, basically helps companies measure diversity, measure employee engagement, and then provide, data and solutions to help companies with that. So we do a lot of kind of joint projects with companies as they look to diversify their organizations or, hire a chief diversity officer or things like that. There's a variety of things they can do, but again, it's tricky because one thing we've seen, and the reason I was keen to have it be like a separate entity from Hirewell is when you're a recruiting firm, like you only have so much control, right? Like you can find great people and you can diversify a talent pool, which is obviously one thing we want to do is understand what the what the diversity is for a particular role or function, and then how do we exceed that with the with our research and our sourcing and our candidate pipelines. But at the end of the day, if the company doesn't have the infrastructure or kind of ability to bring on diverse talent, like they tend to have a lot of turnover there. And
Yeah.
it's even worse than not having a diverse team or diverse organization is having extremely high turnover amongst your gender diversity or racial and ethnic diversity. So
It's
so
so
yeah, long
true.
story short, I mean it's something we we're very cognizant of. We spend a lot of time on, and again I think we do some interesting things and have some nice success stories around there.
Hmm. Yeah. So being able to retain those folks, I mean, anybody, but especially when you're talking about diversity, if your organizational culture isn't ready for it and structure doesn't know how to handle it, then it
Yeah.
makes it pretty hard to keep people. Um, so you mentioned acquisitions. That's always interesting. I'm curious about your experience with acquiring. You said how many one or two acquisitions or
So we
something?
we've technically done three. Like when we
Yeah.
took the initial investment, the first piece was, like with that we, a company under the Project portfolio called Sourcewell, or it was called ICD. We rebranded as Sourcewell, which is an AI automation and sourcing tool, which our recruiters use internally, and then we also like allow we sell it to our clients where they can use it directly. So the idea is understanding for hard to fill roles, kind of it uses kind of AI machine learning to kind of put together strong pools of candidates and lists for that. We're adding kind of new features where it shows kind of the heat map on a national basis of where various talent is based upon skill set, based upon expected diversity and a number of
Nice.
different. So there's some interesting things there. That was a year and a half ago. A year ago we acquired a company called Rainmakers, which is a sales talent marketplace, which again we think will be a key sort of function going forward, basically allowing companies to access talent directly. So it's more of a subscription service and a presentation platform where companies can access sales talent and either do it themselves or kind of work with a Hirewell recruiter to facilitate the process for them. And then the third and most recent was a company called Triton Exec. They're an executive search firm based in the UK. And an interesting bit, like we recognize to kind of complete the value chain, what we're trying to do is being able to identify and help companies hire executive talent is just it's vital to what we're trying to do. And so that was definitely much larger than the first two, because the first two were kind of just small tech companies. That one was a organization with 65 people across 3 continents. So it's been interesting, definitely a fun challenge to undertake and work through.
Yeah. Can you, or would you be willing to share with us a little bit about the structure of Hirewell and how those acquisitions, kind of fit into the structure or what you're doing with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think the initial plan was, to keep them largely independent and, sort of create more of a holding company of talent solutions for our clients. I think
Okay.
as we've recognized with the changes in evolution of the market, you need a little bit more, tighter integration. So, the idea is much more kind of internal collaboration and more of a cohesive set of solutions for clients. Again, when it comes to executive search versus the work that Hirewell does, there's a lot of overlap, but there's still I think there's value in having two brands. So that's kind of the one concept is it's two brands, but kind of a shared sort of delivery mechanism and the ability to put our internal resources towards projects kind of wherever they are for our clients.
Hmm.
And then the talent marketplaces, again, that's sort of the next phase where we're looking to further integrate it, where again it just becomes another sort of tool in our team's belt that we can offer up to clients. But again, so the next phase of the integration is kind of tighter, more sort of cohesive, sort of end-to-end strategy.
Hmm. And how many employees do you have at Hirewell?
Yeah, so it's a good question. It's roughly 180 now. So
Uh-huh.
again, that's kind of across those four groups. I think Hirewell it's a little bit over 100. Triton has I think roughly 60, 65, and then the two tech arms have roughly 10 or 12. So
So as you have grown, and I'm sure that you have uh, a particular kind of point of view on company culture, um, but I'm curious how that has how you've maintained that, or how it's shifted as you've grown?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's been a challenge. If you think about like the first real challenge with culture, I mean, I think every company talks about their culture, and I think for us and how we do it, it's been strong, but not necessarily something that you know, we set out to do. Is more just a lot of our leaders kind of came in with the same set of beliefs, and we didn't really have values, or like stated values for the first 15 years. It was really just the concept of work hard and don't be an asshole. And so,
I mean,
we kind of,
those are two pretty clear values, I think.
right, I mean, as we've evolved, we've talked about kind of how they change, but we frankly kind of go back to that. It's I mean, we've softened the swearing, so now it's just kind of no jerks allowed. It's figure things out. It's being obsessed with our clients. It's kind of very basic things. But again, back to the biggest challenge is when we went from being a heavy in office environment to a almost 100% remote. Now people again all over the world, and as we've grown, like I think what's made us strong is our great people, their passion for what we do, and passion for solving our clients' problems, and kind of truly helping. And it's a little bit harder to do that when you're not sitting next to each other every single day, and kind of hearing from the other leaders and hearing how they talk to clients, how they handle hard situations. But it's something we're constantly focusing on.
Sure. Have you found any particular best practices that have helped you to maintain um, connection and that ability to collaborate and innovate together, that sort of thing? Yeah, any
Yeah, I
particular
mean,
tips?
nothing, I always wish there was something like, super like, proprietary and cutting edge that we figured out. I mean, truthfully, it's being intentional about getting people together.
Yeah.
So we've done, biannual, company, in office where we bring everybody to Chicago, which is where our headquarters is, in, a couple days of, training, collaboration, social events, things like that. Again, much, more kind of quarterly or even monthly kind of team events, a lot of one-on-ones, and just again just really pushing people like to replicate like the behaviors and what you did back when you're in an office, in more of a remote setting. And I think like that gets lost on some people, and sort of when we're talking about newer managers, like we talk to them like, hey, think about 5 years ago when you were early in your career, like how you learned, how you grew. It was just being able to sit next to somebody who had 5 or 10 years more of experience, ask them a question in real time, do a screen share, show them what you're working on, make
Mm,
sure you're on the right path. And just, it's the concept of doing that 10%, showing your work, and then like not going too far down the path of like, spinning your wheels, and not being effective. So
mm.
just a lot of little tricks of just, but again, over communicate, over collaborate, what I mean? Just be positive with your intentions, all the kind of standard cliches, but they're cliches
Yeah.
because most of the time they're true.
Yeah, right. Right. Okay, so as you're looking into the rest of 2023, what are your biggest challenges as a CEO?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's been an interesting year. I mean, when I look at sort of our numbers, we put out quarterly data insights of what we're seeing in the trends in the market. I mean, like the first half of 2022 was massive growth. We saw a bit of a slowdown, and each quarter starting Q3 has been it's been a bit of a slowdown, and that's what we saw. Q1. I think we're seeing a little bit of stabilization, and as we enter into Q2, but it's just a lot of uncertainty, and it's tricky to navigate that. Like companies don't know what the future looks like. That makes them less inclined to hire, makes them easy. Makes it easier to punt or pause on a project or a new initiative or a deal, or things like that. So it's just there's a lot of moving parts, and so it's a matter of kind of keeping the engine running, keeping the team morale high, and then continuing to put the pedal on the gas in terms of business development, client relations, things like that.
Do you tend to be a company that hires ahead or behind or with the growth? And what do you see out there too? Yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in between. I mean, having done this for unfortunately too many recessions, like the biggest takeaway I have from the uncertainty is like it's terrifying in the moment. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how you're kind of going to get through it, and it gets really hard. But like all of a sudden, it stops getting it hard. It gets easier, and like the sky's clear, the clouds part, and the world gets better. And if you can sort of time it where you operate kind of as lean as you can during the slow times, but be ready to capitalize on the bounce back. Like that's how we've seen our growth. And if I look at the inflection points in our company, it hasn't been a straight, linear growth of 10% a year. It's been, right. I mean, it's been, that the 5 to 10% growth, but then some massive upticks. Like the first one was probably 2011, coming out of the Great Recession of 08, 09, 2020, same thing. And so we look at it as an opportunity. Like how do we get through it? How do we manage the team and keep the morale high and the team intact? But then how do we add talent, and how do we use sort of other places, uncertainty or struggles to our advantage? And again, every time we've done that, like we've been able to level up our internal talent, bring on some great people. And we personally slowed down hiring. I think from last year we hired 40 plus people. I think we've hired two this year. And again, we're being pretty selective about it. But I think we're starting to look a little bit more, because there's the opportunity to bring on people who we might not have been able to bring on 2 years ago. And that's the advice I'd give to all companies. Like as scary as it is, you need to focus on kind of getting your company through whatever challenges you might have. But if you're able to do that and do well, like your ability to hire now and your ability to bring on talent when a lot of the world isn't hiring is just, it's a game changer. I mean, again, a year ago, if you're hiring a senior software engineer, like good luck. You're competing against every tech company in the world. Their stocks are all-time high. Their average comp was just mind-blowing numbers, but like a lot of them aren't hiring now. So this is your opportunity to bring on people that you just wouldn't have been able to a year ago. So these are the times to get it
Seize the
going.
moment.
But yeah, it's sometimes easier said than done, because
Right. Right.
exactly.
Seize the moment and accept the fact that it's going to be a bit of a risk.
Exactly.
Or weigh that risk. Okay. Okay. So that sounds like an opportunity. Any other particular opportunities that you see in the market for the next, the rest of 2023?
I mean, I would say that's really it. Like there's, I mean, if you look at the macro trends, like unemployment is still at an all-time low. I mean, it's at like 3.6%. I mean, there's just a lack of people in the workforce. I mean, that's for a variety of reasons. Immigration's at a really an all-time low over the last 6, 7 years. So we're not, the U.S. isn't growing. We're scaling back on immigrants. We have an aging workforce that's retiring. So as much as you think it should be easy to hire right now, it's not. You know what I mean? Like, yes, companies have laid people off, and there's some pockets where it's easy, but it's still like the long-term trend is kind of nuts. So, I mean, it's always gonna be a little bit harder, you think, but again, it's still like the biggest is just the less competition. So that's what companies have to focus on, and that's what they have to seize on. But like, there's not this, a gigantic pool of people who are just sitting on the sidelines waiting for the phone call to come to work. You still have to work. You still have to kind of, have a strong TA function and a strong recruiting process and good recruiters to find those people to kind of manage the process and bring on that top talent.
Yeah. I mean, it seems to me like this is, I know that there is risk. I totally understand that, and everybody has to weigh it for themselves. But at the same time, when you look at the projected numbers for the next 10 years, I mean, if you can capitalize on bringing people in now and keeping them, that they, build some connection and loyalty within the company and everything, you're going to be way better off in 10 years than a lot of other companies that are struggling to fill seats.
Yeah, and you really have to look at like you have to look at your whole organization and do constant talent reviews, because again, like the concept of people leaving the workforce or retiring, it's going to start to accelerate, and you can be in a challenging spot, because it's not, there was a big, there's, I mean, the numbers speak to it, like just as, again, over the last 3 years, the number of people who left the workforce, some have come back, but a lot haven't, and again, depending on your age and kind of where you're at in life, like it's sort of easy, like, I mean, and that's even more acute in certain industries like healthcare. Like we hear it all the time about like nurses and things like that, where they're like the burnout is real, and and that gets back into the employee retention, employee morale. Like it's just so crucial to do whatever you can to kind of keep your people. That's much
and develop the talent that you have. I mean, that's another piece of it is going to be, and I guess are companies right now asking you to find people that, and can you even do this? Find people that have sort of that learning mindset, growth mindset. Like I can grow and I can change and I can develop new skills. Like that's kind of what we're seeing that people are really like that's what companies really need right now are those people that are willing to learn and grow because
Yeah.
everything's going to change so much. But if you can have those folks, I mean, what are you seeing with that?
It's interesting. I mean, I think I would almost label that as like like a baseline is that, like everybody, like people almost don't talk about it because it's almost like just a like an assumption, like, hey,
And a
we
given.
yeah, but at the same time, I think a lot of places it becomes such an assumption that like they then don't ask and don't vet
Yeah.
for it, and so then they wonder why this person who, and I don't want to pick on the youngest generation, but imagine if you graduated college in the last 3 years, like there's a pretty good chance you've never worked in an office, like
Yeah.
just those things that most people learn those first whatever their first crappy job was, like just the office etiquette and behaviors of how to be a grown up, like you just don't
Totally.
and so like it's like companies and people just don't, I'm not the only person saying this, but it's still lost in a lot of places, like when you hire these 22-year-old sales reps or different things like that, or our industry recruiters, and like they love the idea of working remote because everybody likes the autonomy and the freedom, but like you don't have the maturity and the ability to handle it, it's a struggle.
Yeah, definitely. So many things. So we can keep going on and on about that, I think. But okay, so when it comes to performance, employee performance at Hirewell, do you guys have any particular systems that you use? Like, I mean, there's always the talk about the annual review, but do you do anything that's smaller, micro check-ins, anything? How do you handle that whole area of performance?
The nature of our business, I mean, it is very results driven. For the I mentioned those 180 employees, 150 of them are recruiters in some way, shape, or form. So the metrics are fairly straightforward with that. Like we've kind of known what they are for 10 plus years, and it hasn't changed too much. So we know what good looks like. It starts there. So then how do you track the data and how do you do that? Like we have a variety of systems. Our internal CRM feeds into our BI tool, so we're able to kind of see real time just kind of what the trends look like. And the goal is how do we use these things to predict versus just make it more proactive data versus reactive, or I guess understand the leading indicators versus the lagging indicators. So it starts there. It's we believe in continuous feedback because like we do biannual reviews, but like at that point it's kind of too late. Like if the first time someone's hearing about the struggles they're having is in their review, like it's tough to fix or tough to address it. So we really encourage people to make that part of their one-on-ones with their manager or their practice lead. So that kind of becomes part of it. In terms of like our performance review process, like if anybody from our internal HR is watching, they're going to know that it's we're not quite there. It's been largely like Google Sheets is what we've used. We're actually in the process of we've implemented HRS, Bamboo HR, which we're going to use their performance management tools.
And how do you well this I guess gets into the more the manager kind of situation. So when you think about managers, supervisors, what are the three biggest challenges for your managers right now?
Yeah, it's you know, I think the first one is really just the kind of the how quickly the market has seesawed over the last 4 years and just the fluctuations and being able to like handle the change. And like sort of the second part of that is really the whole managing remotely thing. We like just about all of our leaders are this is if it wasn't their first job, it was at least their first management job.
Mhm.
So it's been kind of a unique challenge in helping them understand it and sort of working through that. But then, and kind of sort of the third part is dovetails from that as well. It's the player coach, piece where, you know, again, like when you have all your leaders for that having grown up through the organization, they all start as an individual contributor and they slowly take on more responsibility. But it's tricky because we throw a lot at people. We ask them to do a variety of things. First is just delivery, then it's account management, then it's driving new business, then it's people management, and our best people are kind of doing all, 3 or 4 things at once. And then that's hard. And we recognize as we scale, we need to do a little bit better there, kind of put people in a better position to be successful. But also quite honestly recognize that like success isn't tied to being a manager, right? Like, some of our best people are, individual contributors, and they're extremely, like integral parts of the organization and sort of who we are and what we are. But like, it's almost offering that like alternative career path of like 2 ways to the top.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like the subject matter expert, and then the one that's more of the in the leadership management kind of role.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. What are the top 3 skills that you want every manager to have at Hirewell?
I've gone back and forth on that. And I think like I talked a little bit about like our values or sort of lack thereof for the first few years. But they all kind of go together. I mean, it's it's pretty simple. I think like the first two are again sort of like similar, but it's a combination of empathy and patience. I think when you're managing or leading someone, like they don't know as much as you. Like it takes time. Like it's very easy, and I sometimes suffer from this, where it's easier for me to just do things myself, and I sort of fall in that trap sometimes. But like that's not sustainable. That's not scalable. Where I become a bottleneck, and there's just too many sort of mundane processes that are hinging on my ability to do it. And so it just take the time to teach people what to do, be patient, and recognize that like, all right, as you're kind of growing and developing talent, like they're not going to know everything that you do, but like they will eventually. And the only way they get better is by learning and teaching to them. And then the last one is resilience, right? Like it's like work's hard, life's hard. Like there's a lot of moving parts, and I think it sort of feeds into the empathy and patience. Like like there's going to be days where you just, you don't want to come back the next day, but that's unfortunately, well, hopefully not an option. And you got to kind of, you got to sort of like brush it off, come back and be ready and be stronger. And, again, and that's sort of indicative of the world we're in right now, where it's a bit more challenging. And I try to give the pep talks to our team all the time. Like, we might be going through some choppiness in the market, but like it'll pass. And when it does, like it'll all be worth it. So.
Mm. Everybody experiences those days if I don't want to come back.
Yep.
Everybody does that. I mean, yeah, I think that ability to be able to come back, to be able to reset and just take a break, take a breath and come back resilience is definitely a big piece for sure. This has been great. I really enjoyed this conversation and all the insights that you have around, especially the hiring practices and needs around that. But where can people find you, find Hirewell?
Yeah, so I mean, hirewell.com is the website. We're very active and engaged on LinkedIn. That's kind of our platform of choice. When you're in the recruiting and talent acquisition space, like that's kind of where our audience is, whether it be, companies hiring or people looking for jobs. So, you can find all of us there. We launched a media site called Talent Insights, which is, kind of offshoot from the Hirewell website, but that houses all of our content, our thought leadership. So, we have a lot out there, and there's plenty of ways that you can engage with us.
Yeah. And I do you mind if I throw another question at you? I've got one more.
Sure.
My other question would be who has been, so this is the Voice of Influence podcast. I'm going to ask you about your advice for people who want to have a voice of influence. But before I do that, I want to know, I'm curious, like who has been a voice of influence for you in your life and business and leadership as a CEO?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think it always starts like with your family first, whether it be my dad or my sister, they're both successful. We all went kind of very different paths. My dad was an attorney, worked for him for years. I did that long enough, like, during high school and college to know that I didn't want to be a lawyer. He pushed me to be an accountant, which my sister is, and she's extremely successful, but I realized that wasn't quite right for me either. But, I mean, life's a bit of a trial and error to find out what you like and what you don't. And, I think like just kind of like pushing to just, strive for greatness in whatever you do, and just, take pride, be the best at whatever you choose, was sort of like the kind of what was instilled in us growing up.
Mm, cool. Okay. What's your piece of advice, last piece of advice that you would give to somebody who wants to have a voice of influence in their company?
Yeah, it's when you first start in a company, like you're sort of just you're in it for yourself. You're just trying to figure out what the heck you're doing, like how to like be okay at your job, right? And again, hopefully you're shooting higher than that, but like it's just it's pretty daunting, pretty overwhelming at first. Or that that could be a career, just a specific company. But like the sooner you can understand the big picture of where your company is going and how you can be an integral part in getting the company there, the more successful you'll be. And again, it sounds simple, but like I like understanding like being able to sort of juggle like your own personal interests with kind of how that like drives the company forward and makes them successful. I think is crucial. And again, it may sound like common sense, but like I just sometimes recognize that like people struggle to like tie everything together, and that sort of goes back to like sort of what we've seen over the last year or two. Like it's you know anything worthwhile is hard. And so, again, like it is just kind of having that resilience and sticking with it is, kind of the key to success, but also, you know, like understanding what it is the company is trying to accomplish and making sure you're working in lockstep with them.
Love it. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
being a voice of influence for our listeners today, Matt. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you. It was great to chat.